Originally, when I was going to make monster soup, I had planned on using beef heart to make consommé. At the time, I thought that this was a good real world equivalent to an extract that you could make from a heart or an organ, much how like monster extract is made from, monster parts. But I decided not to. It just didn't feel right, but I wanted to share that because I wanted to make sure that you knew I am very determined to make this as like authentic to the game as possible. I have a container of a simple dashi stock that has been soaking for a few hours, and I'm going to boil it with the dried mushrooms removed. You can still use the mushrooms for something. I don't know what you could use them for, so I just threw them out. I'm not any better than you, and let's face it, we're both equals. I'm not saying you're inferior, but we're both equals, and I don't think you would use it for anything either. Anyway, bring the pot to a boil and then let it go for 3 minutes. Remove the impurities that boil to the surface. I'm not actually saving the scum to boil hot dogs in. I just can't be bothered to go to the sink with each ladle. After you've done that, remove the seaweed and run the dashi through a cheesecloth or some paper towels, and look at that. Set it in the fridge for now since you can't let that sit out for too long. For this soup, I am going to use a Vietnamese pork braise as a base. Much like how a cheese sauce is used for a broccoli and cheese soup, or leftover marinara sauce is sometimes used for tomato and basil soup, I'm going to use this braised pork belly as a base for our monster soup. Pork belly needs to be cleaned first since the little Wilbur's hairs are still on the skin. Scrape the skin with a knife, preferably a butcher's knife if you have one, and then press the skin into a hot, dry pan. I learned that the pan has to be really hot so that the skin chars a bit. I did it on a lower heat, which caused me to lose structural integrity as some fat rendered out. Also, it's easier to work with tongs. Scrape the skin again with a knife, and then if the hairs are still there, you can put it back into the pan to work it a little bit more, but at this stage mine looked okay. Put the pork belly into a pot with enough water to submerge it. Add half a cup of Shaoxing wine and ginger to the pot. Bring it to a boil, and over time impurities from the pork will rise to the top. Since I'm not using this liquid, I'm not going to skim the surface, but instead, after it has boiled for 4 minutes, I rinsed the pork belly with cold water, pat dried it, and then let it chill in the freezer. Don't let it freeze, just let it firm up in the freezer to make it easier to cut up later on. You can take this time to prep your ingredients if you haven't already. Make sure to chop the lemongrass very, very finely. Mince some garlic and slice some shallots. I had to wait at least 30 minutes for the pork belly to get cool enough, but once you're ready to move on, slice the pork belly into thin slices and each piece should have some skin on it. Add oil to a hot pan and sweat all of the aromatics for at least 30 seconds on medium-high heat. Add the pig and then cook that for about 3 minutes before adding what seems to be like too much sugar. This will help caramelize the pork as you cook it for at least another 5 minutes, but in retrospect I wish I had rendered out more fat. Monster soup is very pungent, and here we have the best candidate to replicate monster extract. I'm adding Vietnamese shrimp paste. The consistency, smell, purplish color, and it being an extract hit most of the criteria in order for this dish to be authentic. If you don't believe this to be authentic, then go watch the Zelda video, which covers all of the facts related to monster extract. Incorporate it into the pan and lower the heat to a medium-low. Make sure not to burn the garlic. Let the pork braise for 8 minutes with the lid on. 8 minutes later, I'm deviating from the original recipe and adding 1 cup of dashi and half a cup of Shaoxing wine. The alcohol will mark the last important thing on the list. This is the best we have in the real world, which can, quote-unquote, instill evil thoughts into people. While that reduces down at a simmer, cook some salmon in another pan. Just make sure that yours doesn't have any scales at the last minute, and then angrily rip off the skin because it's late at night and you're tired. Flip the salmon over once some color reaches halfway up. We only want to sear the fish because it's going to be finished off braising in the soup. Once you move it over to the monster soup, let that braise for 15 minutes or until the fish is fully cooked. I broke the salmon into smaller pieces and then gave everything a final mix. And there we go. We have some nice monster soup. Some extra dashi would have been nice to kind of have more liquid, but it still came out pretty good. If you can't eat smelly food or if you're picky, just don't make this. Shrimp paste smells awful. My whole apartment smelled bad, and it took 2 days for the smell to clear out. The consistency and the flavor is very reminiscent of mole. It has like the same earthy, dark, almost bitter profile. There is a hint of sweetness that helps against the salt, and I love the dark, rich flavor. That was just the best part for me. I love it so much. Pork belly is supposed to melt in your mouth, but the fat is still chewy, which is why I wish I had cooked it a bit longer in the beginning. I had this for leftovers for the next couple days, and it doesn't smell as bad when it's reheated. I enjoyed it more with white rice. If I didn't have to cook it at home, I would probably make this again, but tweak the ratio of some ingredients and then maybe cook the pork belly a bit longer. But this smelled so awful that I'm just not going to cook it again.